So, welcome to the second video in the series preparing all of us for September. In the first video, we looked at why our brains might be getting a little bit worried, or certain circuits in our brains anyway, getting a little bit worried about September. My name's Andrew and I work at a company called Action Your Potential. This video is made for all the parents, children and students across the country that are heading back to school this September. An explanation of the way that our brain might be responding to coming back to school, having been out of school. Lots of us, schools shutting for most students in the middle of March. So this is video 2. Do click back and watch video 1. You can see the link to it in the description. There's also a blog post that accompanies this video. So in the last video, we were looking at why we live in this negatively biased brain and what we should do about that. In this video, we're going to investigate automatic negative thoughts or cognitive distortions and urge you not to become a victim of them. In fact, to respond rather than react to them. So first of all, we need to explain what they are, why we've got them, and then what we should do about them. Don't forget, we live in a negatively biased mind. Why is that? Because negative bias kept our ancestors alive. Cautious, anxious cave people lived longer than happy, joyful ones, and they passed their cautious, anxious genes on to the rest of us. And there's a particular way that the brain works. So, just a recap of that idea. Remember, cautious, anxious cave people live longer, and we've got a brain that can actually amplify psychological suffering.
Has evolved to think in such a way that it naturally creates psychological suffering. You see, back in the Stone Age, 200,000 years ago, life was pretty dangerous for our caveman ancestors. So if a caveman or cavewoman wanted to survive, their minds had to constantly be on the lookout for things that might hurt or harm them. And if that cave person's mind wasn't good at predicting, spotting, or avoiding danger, what happened to her? The default setting of the caveman mind was safety first. And we in the modern world have inherited this. Our modern minds are constantly warning us of things that might hurt or harm us. The caveman mind says, watch out, there might be a bear in that cave, you could get eaten. Watch out, that shadow on the horizon might be an enemy from another clan, you could get speared. Our modern mind then does worrying, predicting the worst, avoiding anything that scares you, anxiety in all of its different forms. Back in caveman days, you survive an encounter with a bear or a wolf, then it's useful to replay it. It's useful for your mind to go over the events and remember what you did to survive so that you're better prepared for next time. But in our modern world, we go over and over painful memories, dwelling on them, reliving them, even when there's nothing useful to learn or the lesson has been well and truly learned a long time ago. In the Stone Age era, as a caveman or cavewoman, you have to fit in with the group. If you are alone, you will soon die. So your mind compares you to others in the group. Am I fitting in? Am I contributing enough? Am I following the rules? Am I doing anything that might get me thrown out? Now, in modern life, we're always comparing ourselves to others. But the problem is we're no longer in a small group. Our groups are enormous today, and we carry with us devices that constantly feed us images and stories of people all over the planet. This constant comparison ramps up our fear of being judged or rejected or not fitting in or just not being good enough. The caveman mind tells you you need more food, you need more water, better weapons, better shelter. The cave people who thought this way lived longer and had more offspring. Unfortunately, in the modern world, this manifests as greed, dissatisfaction, craving, wanting. It's never enough. I need more, more, more. And if all of that wasn't bad enough, these Stone Age thought patterns are intensified by the sheer pace and complexity of modern life, our frantic existence, rushing from task to task, that never-ending to-do list. So, When your mind starts doing this unhelpful stuff, as all minds do, remember it's not defective or abnormal, and it's not deliberately trying to make your life difficult. It's simply doing the job it has evolved to do, trying to keep you safe and save you from pain.
So such important information for all of us to understand. We're living in a negatively biased brain, and we're going to now talk about what goes on in terms of threat assessment. So this blue, purple, pink bit with the green bit at the bottom, that is the emotional reasoning circuits, and they get all information first. So we're contemplating going back to school. It goes through our emotional reasoning circuits first. If we spot a particular problem, that might be they're thinking about something to do with September, the amygdala tags that information as potentially problematic. The amygdala's job, that little green bit, is to spot risks and rewards changing in the environment. And when it spots a risk and reward changing in the environment, it sends an alert up to the thinking circuits, which live just behind the forehead up here, the pink wrinkly bit, the prefrontal cortex. So if the amygdala spots a massive threat, like a car coming bobbling around a corner, then it evokes a fight, freeze response. We have a massive reaction and we rush out of the way of the car and we survive. But if the amygdala spots a change, some problem that it can't resolve, it will send up an alert, a negatively charged thought, to get the attention of the whole brain. So what the amygdala does is it gets all information first, and when there's a problem, it will send up an alert to the thinking part of the brain. And those alerts can be very distressing. They're designed to get the whole brain's attention. And you will have had some today. You will be having some in relation to thoughts about September. Let's look at them. Let's begin to understand them. Because once we understand them, we can respond differently to the negative babble of our mind. They're called cognitive distortions. And depending on which book you read, there's between about 10 and 18 different kinds of cognitive distortion or automatic negative thought. Let's introduce you to some of them.
Today, we're going to talk about ATs, also known as automatic thoughts. They're those destructive and unreasonably negative thoughts that you have that make things go from bad to worse. Avoiding ATs feels as impossible as avoiding red lights when you're running late. You're gonna hit one or two, or every single light from your house to work on that morning that your report's due at 9 a.m. and your boss is already on the edge and you might just get fired and then get evicted and... See? Automatic thoughts can pop up and escalate as easy as that. Regardless of reality, ATs are the things that help you build a couple of red lights up to an Armageddon-scale catastrophe in a matter of seconds. Today on Wellcast, we're going to show you how to manage those harmful automatic thoughts with healthier, rational ones. And we're going to use our triple R exercise. You are going to record, rationalize, and replace your ATs. But first, how serious are ATs? A study at UCLA shows that people who got caught in cycles of automatic negative thinking became clinically depressed, self-critical, and less successful in both their work and personal lives. According to Dr. Glenn Scaraldi, these negative, disordered ATs fall into 13 categories, all of which take a toll on your mental health. Here are some of the categories. Assuming or mind reading. Like when you are sure someone is mad at you, even though you haven't spoken to them just because they walked in and didn't say hi. Shoulds, must, and oughts. Those are the insane demands that we make upon ourselves in our quest to be impossibly perfect. The fairy tale fantasy, where we demand an ideal for our life and decide that anything less than that ideal just isn't fair. Overgeneralizing. Nobody likes me. I always ruin everything. And finally, catastrophizing. When you take a little problem and turn it into a big, terrible, life-changing event. How do we stop ATs? Good question. And the shorter answer is we don't. But by being conscious of the fact that we're having them and working to replace them with rational thoughts, we can keep them from endangering our mental health.
So we can't stop them, but we can change our reaction to them. Remembering it's when the amygdala spotted potential change in the world, some sort of change, some risk and reward changing. And obviously we're going from August, having had a lot of time at home, to September, and there's lots of complexity out there. And we looked at the impact that complexity has on the brain in the last video. Basically, our brain tries to predict what's going to happen next. And if it can't predict what's going to happen next, it feels uncertainty, which we feel as anxiety. So if your cognitive distortions are going off in relation to September, all or nothing thinking, catastrophizing, minimization, jumping to conclusions. Are you jumping to conclusions? We all do. Must, should, and ought statements. Blaming. Who knew? Blaming is also cognitive distortion. So what can we do about those cognitive distortions? Well, we can capture them. We can write them down, and then we can categorize them. So once we've got them written on a bit of paper and we've categorized them as either catastrophizing, minimization, all or nothing thinking, we can then get to the core problem underneath. We can investigate, which is what this video is about. Investigate. What triggered it? What was the particular concern that your brain was flagging about September? And be specific. This is a skill. It takes time to respond rather than react, but investigate the problem and then come up with a solution. Challenge. So the solution is look through the paperwork from the school to find a solution, talk to friends, email the school to find the solution, email us to find the solution. There'll be a solution available. Talk to people about the solution, because when we're talking to people, we're turning on the top circuits in our prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of our brain, and that's really what the amygdala is trying to do with its cognitive distortions. It's trying to get the thinking part of the brain involved in seeking solutions. So those what cognitive distortions are. We mustn't get trapped by them. My favourite cognitive distortion is blame. And if you're a parent listening to this, I bet you've experienced some blame.
How many of you are blamers? How many of you, when something goes wrong, the first thing you want to know is whose fault it is? Hi, my name is Brene. I am a blamer. Let me just tell you this quick story. So this is a couple years ago when I first realized the magnitude to which I blame. I'm in my house. I have on white slacks and a pink sweater set, and I'm drinking a cup of coffee in my kitchen. It's a full cup of coffee. I drop it on the tile floor. It goes into a million pieces, splashes up all over me. And a millisecond after it hit the floor, right out of my mouth is this: damn you, Steve. Who is my husband? Because let me tell you how fast this works for me. So Steve plays water polo with a group of friends. And the night before, he went to go play water polo. And I said, hey, make sure you come back at 10, because I can never fall asleep until you're home. And he got back like at 10:30. And so I went to bed a little bit later than I thought. Ergo, my second cup of coffee that I probably would not be having had he come home when we discussed. Therefore, and so the rest of that story is I'm cleaning up the kitchen. Steve calls, caller ID. I'm like, hey. He's like, hey, what's going on, babe? What's going on? So I'll tell you exactly what's going on. I'm cleaning up the coffee that spilled all like dial tone. Because he knows. How many of you go to that place when something bad happens, the first thing you want to know is whose fault is it? I'd rather it be my fault than no one's fault. Because why? Why? Because it gives us some semblance of control. But here, if you enjoy blaming, this is where you should stick your fingers in your ear and do the na thing, because I'm getting ready to ruin it for you. Because here's what we know from the research. Blame is simply the discharging of discomfort and pain. It has an inverse relationship with accountability. Accountability, by definition, is a vulnerable process. It means me calling you and saying, hey, my feelings were really hurt about this, and talking. It's not blaming. Blaming is simply a way that we discharge anger. People who blame a lot seldom have the tenacity and grit to actually hold people accountable, because we expend all of our energy raging for 15 seconds and figuring out whose fault something is. And blaming is very corrosive in relationships, and it's one of the reasons we miss our opportunities for empathy. Because when something happens and we're hearing a story, we're not really listening. We're in the place where I was, making the connections as quickly as we can about whose fault something was.
So blame is also a cognitive distortion. Remembering our brain was built to cope with a time that no longer exists. This is one of our ancestors, Homo habilis, from about 2 million years ago, living in a very dangerous ancestral environment where there were lots of predators. That's where the amygdala learnt to be such a warrior. And back then, fight, flight, freeze, run away was a good solution to lions and tigers and bears, etc. But shouting, running and fighting and hiding is not going to sort out issues like A-levels, GCSEs, or any of the problems of going back to school and getting our heads around that. We looked in the last video at the importance of building the conversation between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, the conversation that is literally the coping skills. And we live across both those networks. So the amygdala spots a problem, the prefrontal cortex comes up with the solution and kind of pipes that solution back. And we'll be exploring that in later videos. Don't forget, we live in this age of uncertainty. VUCA, we talked about VUCA before. Volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity, and complexity. All things that are designed to upset bits of our brain, particularly those bits that like to know what's going to happen next. So, the daily life experiment at the end of this video is to try and begin to notice cognitive distortions in your own mind and in the minds of those around you. Investigate and question the thought. Don't believe everything you think. Thanks for joining us. We look forward to welcoming you into video 3 shortly.